Intellectually engaging to think outside the lines with conversation about the nation that never leaves you blind. Take a listen and pay attention. Here is where you find the educational, sensational meeting of the minds. Yeah, it's the meeting of the minds. Meeting of the minds.
You are watching Meeting of the Minds. I am Selah V. If you're watching via social media, YouTube, or if you're listening on iTunes or Google Play, welcome and thank you so much for tuning in with us. Right now, we have just finished up an amazing event, and we basically left the event and came over here. The event was brought to you by Measure. Measure is a nonprofit organization that is bringing you activism through statistics and numbers. And it is probably, in my opinion, the most effective means of advocacy, if you really personally ask me. So we just finished having a community meeting, which I think we're planning on having every second Wednesday at Houston Tillotson. If you just wanted to drop in and see what went on. But I had the opportunity to get to moderate a discussion with the panel today, and it really, I thought it went amazing. We got to really dig in. So before I ask you guys what you thought and how it went and kind of give them some preview of how it went, I really want us to give them an opportunity to tell them what Measure is, because this is that thing. So let me introduce the founder to you all, Miss Mimi Styles. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come.
And I'm going to introduce everyone, and then we will ask you to tell us a little bit more about Measure.
Perfect.
So, Dr. D, can you give us your full name for us? Because for me, she's Doc, right? So, yeah.
I'm Dee Miller.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a researcher and engineer.
Yes.
So that's where, and I do a lot of work with Measure.
Yeah.
Bringing in design thinking, bringing in a creative way of looking at problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm bringing that engineering back in and understanding and looking at how we can improve the community. So I'm a consultant. That's what I'm doing right now. Designing technology. My passion is, as we're thinking about community issues, technology is increasing. The use of technology is increasing. And so we're often leaving out us as well. And so I'm trying to be at the table so I can say, hey, did you think about this?
Yeah.
Did you think about how they're going to use this? Things of that nature. So that's where I am.
So I love brains with personality. Like, you got the brains, but then the awesome, beautiful personality to bring. And you'll see what I'm talking about. I promise you. We also got Mr. Zavala in the house, representing Dove Springs. Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, so I was one of the panelists because I was invited by Measure to be on the panel, and I'm just here supporting Measure. Measure's been doing good work for multiple years, and just wanted to be one more community group that was supporting Measure.
Well, you've added so much great things to the conversation. Mm-hmm. And we also have Miss Yasmin Smith. Miss Yasmin, welcome.
Thank you.
And what is your contribution? You're like the face of...
No, I'm not the face. I'm the face that asks for things. That's the only face I'm part of. So Yasmin Smith, born and raised Austinite, Chief of Development. I have the pleasure of serving as Chief of Development for Measure. I am a lawyer by day and a activist through data by night.
I was going to say a superhero by night, but that'll work as well. Same difference. So now, Measure.
Yes.
Mimi, Measure. What is Measure, and what are you seeking to accomplish with it?
Oh, wow. It's a good question. So in 2015, during a time where there was so much unrest because of high-profile critical incidences where Black people were being murdered, in the street. Not were, still are, right? But during the time where we were marching and we were organizing, I was actually at that time with Austin Justice Coalition, and just having these conversations about what does trust look like, right? Like, what are we doing in our community to actually to build relationship, with law enforcement? What is community policing, right? Whatever you may define that as. And so I realized that that even through some of the marches and even through some of the demonstrations, that there was still a language that was not being heard on both sides. Like, we weren't speaking the same language. And so I developed Measure because I felt like if we had numbers that could kind of quantify some of the emotions that we had, then it would be a common language between two parties. And so that's where Measure came from. It started off as a project, literally just a project, literally just bringing together folks from Austin Police Department into the room with advocates and activists and community members to come up with some core set of measures of what trust looks like, or what my partner would say trustworthiness looks like, right? And so that was back in 2015. Fast forward to today, we are now a 501c3 nonprofit that literally works to elevate data in order to address disparities. And that's where we are right now. We do multiple ways in elevating data, one of which we had today was our all hands research meeting, where we bring in community members, we bring in people from different institutions alongside with activists in order to facilitate conversations about what change looks like in their own communities.
There's two things that I see Measure doing. One is that I remember during that 2015 kind of area, I remember on social media, there would be people that are like, no, it's the same for white people. It's the same, all across the board. And to really have certain numbers sometimes to say, well, look, this is what's going on with, this community. This is that. So having data in that area is very, very helpful to say, no, there are disparities and this is what that's looking like. But beyond that, I feel like Measure really goes to the community and finds out what they want instead of being told what it is that they want. Yeah. Would you all agree with that? Yes. That's an approach that's being taken?
Definitely. I mean, I feel like we're moving to that space, right? Like right now that's our aspiration. Mm-hmm. Like that's our aspiration, and we're setting up. Right now we're in setup mode. Like we're actually setting up the infrastructure to make sure that we are going into the community with care. And I think Dr. D could probably talk more about what that looks like.
Yeah, so we're really, there's a continuum of research about community-based participatory research, and you can be at this side where you're telling them what to do but still involving the community, or you can actually have the community inform you of what the issues are. And it's kind of like some of the responses we gave earlier about how to collect the data.
That's right.
Is more community informed. It's it's empathizing with the community. It's understanding where they're coming from. It's understanding the Miss Miller, the Miss Jacksons, understanding from a persona perspective, or actually interviewing and saying, how are they going to take in what we're trying to do, or what do they actually need? How do we have that conversation? Asking them organically, having just conversation, just talking, not going in there with any type of agenda. You find out so much just by having the conversation. And so taking that approach.
You're telling me.
You're taking that approach and doing that care model. So I'm working with Paulette at this time, and we are looking at how do we design the blueprint for Measure to use, and we can take it anywhere at any time.
You used the word tonight when we were having the event. You said empath mapping.
Yeah, empathy mapping. So it's funny. I met Mimi at a IBM event, and she asked a question, and I was like, oh, we can do design thinking on that, and that's literally how we really connected. Like, we had met before, but it was like, oh. And so I use design thinking. And it's an engineering approach to designing technology, but now I'm taking it out of the engineering and bringing it in. It's actually a good way of looking at how, and so empathy mapping allows you to say there are various different types of people in this community. And that's based on how you define the community. I think that's critical that we say that part. That's making sure we define who the community is and that we have representatives from those areas in the community. But you take those personas or you interview those people and you go through this step of what would they say, what would they do, how would they feel, what would they think, What are their pain points? What are their gain? What's the measure of success here? And then you also look at it culturally. What does this mean? And that is a way of you empathizing and understanding where they're coming from, rather than saying, this is what we plan to do. We're going to implement it. I'm going to call you up, say, hey, have this meeting, so we're going to tell them what we're going to do. That's just not going to work. You come at them and say, people understand stories. And so when they hear stories, you use those maps to create, here's what we understand. Here's these stories. And you bring it from that perspective, and that's a little more receptive of understanding where you're coming from.
And what you hear is the community being engaged, not only from the project, what it is that we're trying to produce, right? You're also hearing them being engaged in the very creation of the questions that will be asked, to collect the data, to solve that, to do that project. So in every aspect, I want you, who I am serving, who I seek to impact, for you to be the leader. I am just facilitating.
Yeah, you're right. The empathy map actually brings out the problem. The community defines what problem we're answering, what questions. So that's a very good point. Yeah.
I mean, that's like almost ideal for meeting of the minds, even in an area of religion and spirituality. Is truth comes to the top, truth comes to the surface, and if you let people talk with one another, the meat of the situation is always going to find itself there, and people are going to discover the truth together by dialogue. I saw that tonight. We had so many different questions. We talked about things like how do you first serve a community before you enter a community? We talked about things like how do you, once you've served them, how do you keep up with it? Like, how do you maintain that relationship? We talked about so many different things that came easy. There was this one place that we we wanted to go there.
I was ready.
I stay ready. I'm ready now.
And first of all, we were at a university, and I already knew, like, when you've been moderating discussions for a while, you already know that a conversation is about to go whoop, right? And so I knew timing. Me and Mimi are here with timing, and I knew that it's not going to be able to happen. But at the same time, I know, and I had to make a comment to let them know, I already know, guys, but we're going to have to reel it in for the sake of time. But I did end up saying that at late night talk, we're going to bring it up.
Yeah.
So it kind of came up where we brush over this all the time, Mimi Styles. All the time we brush over it, that we say, well, how do you bring in people that are hard to access, or people that are hard to reach? And we talk over, maybe disabled people who are hard of hearing, people who are, we talk about, old people who don't have access to technology. But really the question everybody wants to know is how do we get the people that, when we brought up, that don't, almost are disenfranchised with the whole process.
That's right.
They said, we've done the marching. We've done, we don't even trust y'all in the first place. How in the world do we tap into getting involvement there? And if I had $1 for every time I know an activist that was so excited about their about the event or something that they had put on, and it didn't go the way that they wanted it, if I had $1 every time. Now this event right here, it doesn't really go that way, because the reason why is because, like, literally you have excellence applied. Like, I'm not saying that the other people didn't apply excellence. I'm just saying that I'm not saying that they didn't apply excellence, but there's just like a certain methodology that we're about to discuss to tap into how to get people involved. But so firstly, let's just discuss about getting people involved, and then let's go into those people that are just harder to reach. Like you said, don't want to have anything to do with anything. So Mimi, like, what is Measure? Why are so many people at the Measure events? Because I've gone to so many events, and it's like just the activists that put it together, So tonight, there were people there, and they got stuff out of it.
Definitely. Absolutely. So tonight's meeting was called Community Mobilization, Mobilizing Our Community. And so when we think about what does community mobilization look like, we have to understand, number one, that it involves everyone. It involves It involves institutions. It involves nonprofit leaders. It involves Big Mama down the street. You know, it involves the teacher, the librarian, the police officer, the activist, the lawyer, the doctor, the news media person, right? All at the table. So I think one thing that and I always look at like what went right or what goes right with my organization.
Right.
I'm very critical. I don't seem like I'm super detailed, but I'm extremely detailed. I mean, it's to the point to where I'm the one checking people in when they come because I feel like that's the first part of building a relationship, right? So I think that's number one. Is Measure has been very successful in terms of building relationships.
That's right.
You know, but still at the top, you know, there's still that air of almost, you know, of kind of like, you know, we have kind of siloed, right? And so what I try to do is like encourage the people that I'm working with to make sure that they're reaching out. And so what we had in the room today were leaders from different organizations. We had, you know, people that were from HT. You know, making sure that we elevate their voices and let them know that they're important. So the methodology behind it is actually a strategy. Coming from Eric Bird, who's the VP. We break up into groups, into facilitation groups, right? First, you know, usually when you have a panel discussion, it's always the panel, and the panel is the only one talking, right? And the panel members are the only ones' voices that are heard. First, we break up into the groups, and then each of those people that are in the groups are contributing to the entire event. And so they feel important, they are important, what they're talking about is important. And then from there, that's when we go into the actual discussion. And the panel members, who are the SMEs, who are the subject matter experts, are just filling in the gaps. And so when you do that, you know, everyone matters. Right? Like everyone matters, everyone is included. And you know, if I'm looking at just this event, how Eric has like structured this thing, like it works. Like that's the way that that's the way it's worked
So
for us.
more community interaction, they have a voice. We spent more time dialoguing together, and panelists just kind of touched on it, you know, lightly. So that was good. Now, about the people that are so hard to reach, the people that don't want to have nothing to do with law enforcement, don't want to have anything to do with government, how do we get them involved? Any ideas? How do you go about maybe?
I mean, everybody's strategy is going to be a little different, but I can only speak for the strategy that I know that works for me. So for me and my group, the way we base it on nobody has more experience, nobody has more knowledge, nobody is more the subject matter expert than the person who's actually from the neighborhood. So Mimi might not be from Dove Springs, but I am. So Mimi and I should be able to introduce myself to Mimi, and Mimi should take my introduction to say, hey, I know I'm not from the neighborhood, but you know the neighborhood like the back of your hand. People there know you because they grew up with you. They went to school with you. They grew up on the same street with you. They got in the same bad actions that you got into. Everybody knows all the little dirt about you and the stuff that you did when you were a kid. So they can trust you to where they don't know Mimi yet. And so ideally, every nonprofit, every institution, in my mind, should go to the community leader who already is established there to say, hey, the people trust you. The ones who don't go to City Hall, the ones who don't go to the county commissioner's office. And I vouch for Mimi, Vimy takes my vouch, and that's how you get people who would never normally come to her or never even come to a City Hall meeting. Now all of a sudden will fill out her survey on email, or will answer her phone call or her text message, or whatever the case may be. It's got to be the way you reach those people who don't trust government, who don't trust the system, who don't trust police officers. The way you reach them is you have to get, in my opinion, vouched by somebody who already has an establishment in that community. Because my community, Dove Springs, is not just, now it is mostly Latino, but it hasn't always been. Dove Springs used to be a mostly black neighborhood at one time. And so those of us who were born and raised there like myself remember those days. And so a group like mine is unique because I can bring different voices to the table because I have people who are African American, who are white, who are Latino, who are all from the neighborhood, who are different faiths, who some might not have no faith. But you can bring those to the table because I was born and raised there. Where I can't do that in Metropolis or Munberg or somewhere else because I'm not from there. So that's how you get people who normally don't want to come to the table. That's how you get them to the table. Is you got to have somebody that will vouch for you.
I think
bring
that's
that to
actually
the
an
table.
excellent way to go about things. Is humanity is kind of like where nobody wants to go to a party that nobody else wants to go to, right? And it's almost like if you get the cool kids on board, people have more of a
Buy-in.
desire, a buy-in, yeah. So even if you have somebody, like you say, in the community that is, let's say even an MC out there, let me show you why you're so valuable, is that when you can tell that you're the type of person that people follow, you know who I'm talking about, that people just follow you, then that's how powerful you are, that if you were like, I'm going to start getting community involvement, you'd probably have like 10 of your friends, doing the same thing too. And so that's definitely excellent choice. And I think maybe us identifying like who the popular, people of a demographic that we want to reach are and having them get involved is very strategic. But I want to ask another question to tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong, because I don't know until I ask the question, right?
Very true.
So do you think that there was a time that activism was popular, especially like maybe with the Black Panther movement and so forth, and then it got killed and fizzled out? A lot of leaders got separated and fizzled out. Then it was replaced with not that much leadership and activism, and now it's starting to come forth again. Do y'all think that there's a new kind of rebirth to like that community response?
Honestly, so I've grown up in this type of world, right? So like my grandfather, he was a commissioner he was a police commissioner in Oakland area, and he worked between like the Black Panther Party and the police department, and that's what he did to facilitate communication. Meanwhile, his son, Little Charles, my uncle, was a Black Panther. So he, marching and, doing what he had to do. Have a lot of respect for the Black Panther movement, the new Black Panthers as well. My dad, generation after him, NAACP, and then there's me right now, right, with Measure and, starting and doing my work here. Honestly, Black people have been collective and being, in leadership and working together to see change forever, since the very beginning of time, since Sojourner Truth, in the very beginning, we've been doing this work. Booker Taliaferro Washington, Frederick Douglass, like it's been sustained. So anytime, people think that, it's just a movement, this is not a movement. This is a lifestyle.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? This is a lifestyle. This is a fight. We always talk about like the struggle continues. Quite honestly, it does. Unfortunately, because of economic wealth, because of the issue that of taking us from our motherland and putting us in this beautiful country of America. So no, I would actually push back against that and say that, we have sustained this movement, this struggle, this collectivism, this self-empowerment, it's so self-empowering, right? And for where we're at, Yasmin and I at this point, owning our own data, like this may be a little bit of a different type of movement, but you know what? Big data is a movement, right? Like the way that we're doing this work, it's a movement. So I just think that as long as we continue to be collective and work together collaboratively, we're always going to move forward. We're always going to move forward.
And that's where I have a little bit of my pushback, is because I do believe that it's been sustained, and there have been waves and waves and waves of activism.
That's right.
I don't think our activism as people of color has been as strategic as it could have been, and as collaborative as it could have been within generations, and then within different generations. Right. So when you look at the civil rights movement, I think that could have been a little bit more strategic, and at a very local level, you know, I'm not going to put anyone on blast,
Right.
but I do think that there are leaders of this community from different generations that have not taken the time to sit us down as the new wave and hip us to game.
Yeah.
And so, and that's twofold. That could be my hubris as a young person not to go to you, or it could be that in this activism role, you've been beaten down for 30 years, and sometimes you got to ring the bell and go to sleep. So I though I think there have been ways, I think that there's strategy could be evolved upon.
Or maybe that there's systematic ways of trying to stifle the community.
It's not by coincidence that we're broken up and separated, and it's definitely not, you know, a mystery of why we.
But there have been people pushing.
Yeah.
And you know that's how POC have gotten so far. Like it's all connected. It's all connected. If I allow, I think even Martin Luther King said, if what they do to someone else is directly what they're doing to you.
Yeah.
And it is. It really is. If you allow that for them, it will happen for you. Absolutely.
But you got to remember also what Mimi's talking about. I mean, this is Black History Month, right? And if you go back to your Black history, yes, I know I'm Mexican. I know I'm not Black. But there's still Black history even in the Mexican history. And people who are real history buffs should know that the second president of Mexico was the guy who abolished slavery in Mexico. And the reason why he abolished slavery in Mexico was because he was half Black himself, even though he was Mexican and he was the second president of Mexico. And that's why so many slaves in Texas were fleeing to Mexico, because America still had slavery full blown. So people need to understand there are a lot of Africans who are in Mexico. And that even in Mexico, Mexicans themselves are interaction between Spaniards and Native Americans. And most of Spain was conquered by the Moors from Egypt at one time or another. So there's a lot of African blood in the Spaniards who integrated and got together with Native Americans who ended up making Mexicans. So the more history you know about yourself, you would know that MLK sent a telegram to Cesar Chavez when Cesar Chavez was having his fasting strike, and that they talked. You would know that these things happened, and then at certain points we decided, well, Black Lives Matter or Black people being killed by police, that's only a Black people thing. So we as Latinos shouldn't be concerned about that. And that's a wrong way of thinking, because when illegal immigration comes up and now all of a sudden somebody wants to build a wall, we're looking for, okay, well, where can we get our support? Where are the African Americans supporting us when we got an issue? It's because the more you separate, the more you divide and conquer, the better off you will be. The better we collaborate, the better we support, the better we empathize with each other, the more productive we'll be. And I think that's something that each younger generation has to pull up that mantle, because if we as a younger generation, and there's younger ones underneath us, that keep siloing each other and saying, no, you should just be doing the Black thing, and you should just be doing the Latino thing, the less productive we're going to be. Because if you don't know, like in Dove Springs, my neighbor was Black on all sides. So whatever issue they were dealing with, I was dealing with, because I was surrounded by it. So we live on the same streets, we go to the same schools.
We're affected by the same problems.
We're affected by the same police officer.
We're fighting the same systems.
The same systems, exactly.
When the block party happens and they call the police officers, there's not just Black people at the black party, there's Latinos at that party too.
Those same systems. You go ahead.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand, because I totally agree with everything you just said. But earlier you made a comment that was kind of like, kind of goes against what you're saying. You were telling us to, certain people should stay in your lane. So help me understand.
She was waiting for it.
Help me understand how is that different? Because I
This is the
believe
doctor
everything
coming out.
you actually just said. I'm there with you.
Right.
But then I said he told us earlier,
Well,
stay in my lane.
What I was adding to was that one of my fellow panelists was saying, because you are highly educated, now you don't want to deal with us who are down in the inner city. And what I was trying to say is, if that's your circle, that's your lane, and that's who you want to be around. You only want to be around other highly educated minorities, then go ahead, stay in that lane. That's what I was trying to say. But what I'm saying is, my lane is I know my history. I know my culture interacts with other cultures.
Absolutely.
And so I'm going to stay in my lane. And my lane is this area because there's going to be a lot of Latino activists that would not have gone to your event tonight, even if you had invited them personally yourself.
Right.
Because they don't see what you're doing is somehow impacting what they're doing. They see you as two different worlds. And especially if I go to the older generation, the Miss Miller generation, on the Latino side, where there's some Miss Rodriguez's, and then they're not going to want nothing to do with what you're trying to do now, because it's still seen as, this is my effort and that's your effort.
And even what's going on here, it impacts the Middle East. Those systems that we're talking about, it all, if it's not addressed here, it all affects there too. We'll talk about that on another day. But something, I love the way that you put it, that kind of stay in your lane, because I like the way you put it more. The reason why is sometimes we have activists, you know, that, like, let's say, you know, you feel like you want to serve this group of people and you're better equipped to serve this group of people. Sometimes we put down the people that are serving this group of people and the way that they're serving that group of people.
I don't agree with that, because
I know that's
what I was.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is,
That's another panel member that was very hard for that.
you can't. I'm from an old school generation that you can't hate on nobody because you don't know what they have gone through.
Right.
You don't know their experiences.
Yes.
So when I was young, I used to hate on Oprah Winfrey all the time.
Oh, no.
Because
Why
she,
you
because,
doing like that?
because she had, because
I'm trying to be with this Oprah.
let me tell you, because she had a lot of money and she did a lot of her donations to Africa. And I kept thinking in my brain, there's a lot of inner city kids right here in America that could use that help. And in my brain, all I knew was that she was doing a lot in foreign countries, but that was her money. She could do whatever she wanted with it. That's her money.
Right.
And as I got older, I realized, well, you know what? When I get in a certain position, I'm gonna do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be people who, just like I was,
That's right.
that necessarily not gonna agree. Well, just like, because you are a highly sophisticated black lawyer, and you do live in a nice part of town, and you only do stuff in your little circle in that nice part of town, people are going to hate on you.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay.
But
if that's your circle,
but it's not even
if that's
that.
your
It's
circle, then
it's
stay in your circle.
Me stepping out of that circle. So I'm in 2-3 right now.
Right.
So as soon as
As
soon as I got out of law school, I went back to the east side. Okay.
I'm in 2-7.
So my struggle is when I try to go back to my community after being away for so long. I am looked at as the city.
You're the outside.
The outside. Why are you
You're
here?
not in.
You're not supposed to. But the thing is that I went over to this other lane. I put my happiness and my mental health and my physical well-being and my spiritual well-being. I put all that on a shelf for a decade, and I went and I grinded, and I got these accolades. But for what? Only to come back to my community.
Yeah.
So when people say, when people are like, oh no, you got your suit on. Oh no, you
stay over there.
Stay over there. Oh no. You think this was for me? If all of this was for me, I'd be on a beach somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I would be doing all other things. The only reason that I decided to be a lawyer was because I thought that this was a route that I could elevate people's voices.
Absolutely.
That I could be in the middle of justice and injustice, and I could speak for my people. Because the rules, we can look at the rules, and the rules are not fair for all of us.
They're not fair.
And so I decided I was going to be one of the people to go write the rules.
But you know how many go to law school and don't come back?
But I'm not everybody.
I think that's why they treat that.
That's the thing.
But I think that's why they treated you like that.
This is me. So
it's wonderful you come back because there's so many who don't.
But you have to be open to
that
coming back.
I
You
am.
can't not you. You can't group because you know so many don't come back that there's not going to be someone that does come back, and you cast them out. You make them ostracized out of their own group, and you call them out for it. And that's, in all honesty, as I was sitting in that meeting, I was like, I have ability to help you, and because you're talking like this, I won't.
And it's not
that you start building fences.
You start building
for unnecessary fences. You start creating these silos within, and you just keep the system going.
And
Because that's what they want.
And if you're so down for the cause, if you're so down to see all of us, and I say all of us being POCs, if you're so down for all of us elevating, why would you ostracize me knowing good and darn well I don't fit in over there where my tax, and I don't have the community over here. So now I'm just gonna silo by myself.
Yeah.
Now I'm just gonna drown by myself.
There are
Hold on.
You can fight. I feel like this wasn't this your fight.
I need to ask a question because I really want to know. It seems like, let's say for example yourselves, if you want to have an event that is catered to this demographic of people, and then now you want to go and have an event catered to this demographic of people, there are people who are literally talking stuff or down about that. Like that, that's something that needs to be maybe looked at as well. Is that, why do we do that as well? Is tear down other activists or people that are doing something. Mimi, you were about to say something.
I'm sorry.
Do you know?
No, it's fine. So here's the thing too, like, so trust is a big factor in this, right? Like when my brother Ricardo says something like, this is stay in your lane, this is my neighborhood, make sure that you come into my neighborhood with respect. You know what I'm saying? So when that conversation was elevated at tonight's meeting, like I got that too, right? Like I understand that. Like we have got to have mutual respect for each other, even if we do leave and come back. Here's the thing, right? Like the Black community has been so torn down in many cases that we tend to not even trust each other. Yeah. Right? So like that relationship building, that trust building is so important in the very beginning, and the very, like when you set the stage for even wanting to go help, right? Because and that's another thing, we talk about helping our community. We cannot say we're going to go help our community. We need to start saying we need to understand what's going on in our community. Like, let's start using words like, I want to understand this or assess this or understand
Empower.
Things like that. And so that's, I think that's what that conversation, I think that's the content around that conversation. It wasn't like, you can't do this or you can't do that, but it was more of, when you come in, have that respect, right? Like, I'm from California. I'm from California in the 90s, right? Like, you didn't go, sometimes I'm just saying, like don't get me started. Don't get me started. Y'all gonna show folks stuff that they don't need to see. I don't got Eric over here trying to pull me back right now, right? I'm the
I'll be the hype man.
I've been walking all across this table. I'm so sorry. I'm just saying. Let me just be real quick. But I mean, you had respect enough, even if you knew that you got to go pick up somebody in the other neighborhood, like you still have respect not to wear a certain color, right? I'm just saying, there was that mutual respect and I think that was what that context was around. It's like, you're going to go into that community, build a relationship first. Yeah. Like we want to have trust between community and police and all that other stuff there. Yeah. But you know what? What about your own trustworthiness, right? Yeah. So that's one thing that we do at Measure, right? Like even when we're doing some work in Rumber. Yasmin's been in Rumber for months now, like just building relationship. Wow. Like starting with that.
About 3 months now.
Yeah. Let's start just with that. Let's start with relationship building, and I think that was what that conversation was about. We cannot alienate each other. Period.
Because I think of it as more so, a lot of people go about building relationships. I don't always think relationships equal partnerships. And I think what your whole goal is to be partners. Like when you're going after it, it's like, I'm going in this together. I'm helping to understand. I'm not helping you. Right. We're doing this together. This is our problem. You agree? You agree? Okay. So I was like, wait a minute. But seriously, like, that is what I think one of the biggest, a lot of people focus on relationship building, and there's different levels of relationship. But when you get to that partnership, that's a whole different thing, because you're looking at things at a common level, and it's your common concerns. And that's something I think all communities need to work on building partnerships. And you understand what I'm saying? So, I don't know.
But remember, MLK and Malcolm
didn't agree.
didn't agree.
No.
They did.
But they were both necessary.
They were both necessary, but in the end, they did have a.
So what I'm trying to say is that I don't have to agree with everything you say.
You shouldn't agree with that. I want you to challenge me.
That's
But what I'm
partners.
saying
That's
is, but
partners.
at the end of the day, we should both hold each other
Accountable. And that's the thing.
And
But that's what your partners do. When you think of a corporation, because you have that wingman, that person that's going to be the face and everything, but you have someone that's going to check you at any time. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that partner to check me. I want Mimi to check me. I want Yaz to check. I want everyone to check me when I'm in the wrong place, because that's my partner. That's what I expect.
Don't have me out here looking dumb. Don't have me out here. Fix my crown. Don't blast me, but fix it. You know? So that's the only way we're going to evolve.
I told somebody I like my crown on crooked. Like, I wear it cocked to the side.
That's what you should do. Instead of hating on someone or putting someone else down because they don't do it the same way you do it.
Right.
What you should do is look, okay, you do things a certain way, I do things a certain way. Let's see how we might be able to partner together. But I can't hate on you because you have a different experience than I do. You have a different subject matter expertise than I do.
Yeah.
So
I
what we're
think
supposed
you bring
to
up
do.
a good point there.
Yeah.
The experiences are different, but you can get value out of different experiences, and
Yeah.
so that's critical. So, yeah.
I'm not really big into shaming like people like at all, but there's one area that like I do want to say.
Juicy.
Yeah. I actually feel, you've heard me talk about this before, like when you have a leadership that's in a role that is a person of color and there's normally not people in that arena doing that thing that's a person of color, do not like tear them down. Like it could be a character flaw, like something so simple. It could be anything, like, and you will completely tear that person all the way down because they held their event at a snooty place that, you know, or whatever, anything. It could be anything. Or that they hung out with people that you thought that they shouldn't hang out with. You will tear down their whole entire platform.
I agree.
I don't shame, but in that area, like shame. I'm not for tearing down a leader. Like honestly, I feel like if they're not like hurting a child, let them ride. Let them make it.
I think it's almost like a form of institutionalized racism, quite honestly. Because we were talking about what race is. Like, I have my own thoughts on race. I don't believe that people of color can be racist. People can quote me on this right now. I believe that we can be. I believe that we can be, you know,
go look it up if you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Look it up.
Dr. Claude Anderson. Dr. Claude Anderson. That's all I'll say there. But I feel like, you know, it's hard enough. Like, we're talking about equity, and we always talk about, you know, we want, Austin is, you know, wants to be so equitable and on all of this, you know, which is wonderful. You know, we all aspire to see that happen here. But when you're talking about tearing down leaders of color, I personally feel that there sometimes can be a vendetta against black leadership within Austin, and we have to call that out.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, I just opened up my social media and saw like more, you know, black leadership being torn down.
Yeah.
Like for little things that a person that is not of color
Gets away.
could totally get away with, or, you know, pay a couple dollars and it's swept under the table. Well, guess what? Like, when you talk about, you know, making sure that we uphold our black leadership and things like that, there, like, that is so important.
Yeah.
Because that's anti-racist work, what you just said. You know, there's not even enough black leadership to be tearing us down.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, come on, right?
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. There are moments where I've called Mimi and been like, I didn't know we had beef with these. Like, I just got blown up on social media. I wasn't ready. I thought we were good, but you don't know until you're literally in front of that person's face or that organization's face, or you interact in some way, and there's this hostility and you don't know where it comes from, and you're just, well, I respect you. We move in different ways, but you do you over there.
Yeah.
But some people don't look at it that way. If it's like a
Sometimes
direct
there's
threat.
this air like, well, I do this and I
That's
do
right.
that and I,
That's
you know,
right.
and this is the way I do
That's
it.
right.
And there's a lot sometimes of that approach
Yes.
to a thing.
But the law of success calls for masterminds
Yes.
and bringing two
Yep.
or more people. You love me.
It's
Talk about the mastermind. I'll take it.
And that's really what we need to be doing. You can come to the table, different experiences, different approaches to it, but you're coming together for a common good.
Right.
And that is what the law of success calls for.
But if you look at our history, people of color, we haven't been able to do that. We've been conditioned to be crabs in a barrel. We've been conditioned to say that there's only this much, and so y'all five need to figure out which one gets the cookie, which one, and who's not going to eat tonight.
And keep in mind that same person has said, I'm not dealing with all 50 y'all.
Oh no!
Right.
Y'all need to pick one.
Pick one.
And that's the only one that I'm going to deal with.
And so we've been conditioned throughout history to feel as though we're on opposing
We're always
teams.
competing with
We're always
each other.
competing with each
Absolutely.
other. But then you look up and you're like, oh no, we're literally just working on the same exact
That
puzzle
Yes, we are.
from different sides.
Yeah.
Yell at me if you need some help over with the blue corner over there. I'm gonna be over here messing with the trees. But it's the exact same puzzle.
But there are generations, though, have been brained.
Yes, systematically.
So we're an older Latino male right now who's been doing activism in Austin for 40 years. Sometimes won't give me the time of day
Come on,
because I'm the young one coming up,
speak on it.
and he needs the limelight. I don't need to be getting any limelight. And if I get any limelight, I need to make sure I give credit
to him.
So that's a patronism, patron thing that happens in every culture, because in the black culture, I've seen it happen that way too. Where if you don't kiss the ring on somebody, you're not going to get very far either, because it won't be them shutting you down. It'll be your own trying to shut you down.
Not all skin focused.
And let's say like you have a 10-year activist, an activist that's been in the game for 10 years, and you got an activist that's in the game for 2 years. Let's say they make a faux pas or something. You're going to eradicate all the leadership they were doing because you felt like they were. Sometimes I've done things and I'm like, oh, I was young when I did that. You know, why was I thinking like that? I'm so glad I'm on this tip now. You know, we don't give people that opportunity, and this isn't geared to any special category of people, but any people that cannot recognize who their leaders are. If you can't identify who the wise men are, or even the men that got that special spirit on them, if you can't see this is a leader, no one in that group is coming up. If there's an inability to say, you're wise, you know, we're going to lift you up, or, oh, I perceive you are a man of God. I'm doing it in different arenas, right? This one's spiritual, this one might be. And if we cannot perceive who our wise men and women are in any category of people, because there's a couple movements that go, there is no leader, there is no head. I actually don't agree with that at all. Like, no head movements aren't going to go very far, in my opinion. I really do.
And that head has to, in me, you know, and I know Ricardo too, serving as kind of like the top of his organization and the top of my organization. I'm really very, very big on cultivating leadership underneath myself.
Huge.
So if you have that responsibility as a leader, you know, like, I don't want to be the fix all the time. Like, I'm glad when my sisters are stepping forward and they're, you know, and Yasmin can tell you, I meaningfully put my people around me in the front.
You do, Mimi,
like,
majorly, more than I've ever seen. Actually.
And I feel like that's so important because, I mean, if you really think about it, it's like a family, right? Like, you know, you don't say I love one kid more than the other or anything like that. Like, everybody has to be important.
Right.
And so, you know, that's a lot of. So, and not to push back against what you were saying.
No.
But it's
meeting of the mind is supposed to be different opinions.
Okay. Because here's the thing, like it's so much responsibility and so much weight, like on a quote unquote leader. Like, I mean, I see myself as the CEO.
Right.
Right. I am. Right. Am I the leader? No, because I'm here, right? Like, and I have all of these amazing leaders all around me. I feel like when you put, you know, my mama always used to say, you know, one monkey don't stop no show. Not saying that I'm a monkey. This is a black show and everything like that. but sometimes when you do that, when you elevate leadership that high, one monkey can literally stop a show, right? So like if we as leaders are not
creating more leaders.
if we're not creating more
Micromanaging.
yes, absolutely, then we fail to actually progress the movement. We totally miss the mark. We totally fail. So it's important. Like myself, I have to be replaceable, right? I mean, I'm real project based. You know that.
Very much so.
So that's the call that I have for leaders, is to be replaceable at every single instance. And then not only you be replaceable, but I should have like 3 or 4 Yasmins.
Yeah, that's right.
I should have 3 or 4
Yasmin's
Ds.
cultivating other Yasmins.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Well, you talked about faith earlier.
Oh, yeah.
So as a man of faith, as I'm a born again Christian myself, as a man of faith, my leader of my faith, Jesus Christ, came on here to say that he would wash the feet of his disciples.
Yeah,
right.
He said, when I do this, remember that I do this.
Exactly.
That I wash your feet so that you will know that I came to serve, not to lead. So that in the sense that what you're talking about, bring both of them together. Bring the activism, the nonprofit, and the faith together and say, as a leader, you are not to be, I'm the boss, what I say goes. What you're supposed to be is, I'm here to serve you.
Yeah.
So in the sense, in my group, I don't even have voting rights in my group. My group votes, and whatever they vote for, that's what I have to carry out. I don't have any vote. I don't have any voting rights. So if they vote on something that I don't personally agree with, it doesn't matter. I still have to follow it. And so a servant leader is what you should strive to be. You should be that person who wants.
A good leader creates disciples, if we're still using that language. You know, you duplicate yourself in others because, you want to create more generationally. That's what the evidence of any good leader has been, is to create. That was an excellent point, Mimi. Excellent.
I'd also say that, and to Mimi's credit, she hasn't surrounded herself with yes men. So, you know,
I've noticed that
look,
too.
me and Mimi, we will have it always ends with I love you, because I do love her. We are a family.
Right.
But as a family, sometimes I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. That's not how I feel. And so, you know, it's creating those leaders that are coming after you with the same tenacity and the same mindset, but also engaging with them in their infancy as a leader, right? So, because that's how you're going to build me up. I'm going to have to learn how to stand up and even to my leader and say, no, that's not the way I want to do it. And so to Mimi's credit, I think to all, you know, leaders who are true leaders, who we've decided are the wise men and the wise women, why, you know, it's a fool who stops listening. So those same people that we're propping up as wise have to actually be wise.
You know, the next topic I want us to do
Idea.
is how to go about that with the leader. Like, if you feel your leader is tripping about something or whatever, what's the correct way to approach?
Depends on who the leader is.
But it's all about how.
There's also
all about
times
delivery.
when it's about the cause, sometimes you just shut up and you do it. There's a time for that.
Definitely.
And then there's time to take them to the corner and be like, can you explain why we're doing this again? I think we should have a whole talk about how that structure and interaction with leadership should work. I like it a lot.
I like it too.
I told y'all this time would go by fast.
Wow.
Yeah, I tried to tell y'all, and I extended it a little bit.
Can I say something? Can I say one last thing?
Yes.
So one thing that, and one way that I end out a lot of my like letters and emails and and stuff is saying, you know, cheers to the greater good, right? And so when you just focus on the greater good, everything else becomes meaningless. All the minor details become minute and they almost disappear. And so if we continue to focus in on just that greater good, just imagine like in the galaxy, right? Think of the sun in the middle of in the galaxy, right? Like you have all of these planets and they're all in their own lane. God has ordained this, right? And and they're not bumping into each other. They're not fighting for that resource of the sun. They're just methodically going together, strategically, all having the same, you know, all seeking the same energy. And so if that's what we do as leaders, as, you know, and all of us are leaders here at this table, if we just continue to seek the source, we continue to seek the greater good, we don't even have to worry about any lanes because God already got us, right?
There's enough for all of us.
Enough for everybody.
There's enough for
There's enough for everyone.
I will provide.
Well, just want to bring this to remembrance one more time. Measure is using data to change things. They're actually traveling and going to different places and speaking to police departments. Y'all have gone several places and worked with several police departments, if I'm not mistaken.
Australia, New Zealand.
There
yes,
you
ma'am.
go. And training and
Yes.
using the data to, what are you using the data to do over there, for example?
Yeah, so we're one of the only groups, I think, that are bringing amazing trainings to police departments, whereas they would never get training like from the phenomenal Fatima Man, like
Right.
mindfulness
Absolutely.
is de-escalation. Yes, like having opportunities for police officers and activists and researchers and techies to engage with people like Megan, Harding and Virginia Cumberbatch with Rebel
Shout
and
out
Resist.
to Jenny Cumberbatch.
And so what we're also doing is we're elevating evidence and needing evidence-based practices to qualify the tactics of policing and to, does your implicit bias training, what does that mean? So you got the training, now what? What's the result of that? And so that's what evidence-based policing is looking at. That's just one piece of it. But using evidence to inform, procedure. And so that's what we're doing. We're doing a lot. We also look at, we're not just in policing though. So Measure is also working in education.
That's right.
Mobility from poverty. We're also looking at public health right now. And so, it's a wide range.
We're all over the place doing a lot of
Yeah.
things.
So if you're a super cool nerd like us,
That's all I was like.
feel free to look into that. Feel free to look into Measure if you would like. I would like to thank our sponsors. I would like to thank Beautiful Solutions for all their solutions for beauty. I would also like to thank Syntex Guns, the only black gun store in Texas. And I would also like to thank B-Print for creating our website. Rebecca.
And so Rebecca,
big
big shout out.
Shout out.
Shout out to B-Print.
Becca's one of the original co-founders
Yeah,
of Measure.
she's amazing. And she's supposed to be in town
Really?
right now, like around this time area, I think.
Love Becca.
Maybe I wasn't supposed to, but I did. Okay. So please do not forget to subscribe to us and to rate us if you're listening from iTunes and Google Play. And thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having us.
Till next time.
Intellectually engaging to think outside the lines with conversation about the nation that never leaves you blind. Take a listen and pay attention. Here is where you find the educational, sensational meeting of the minds. Yeah, it's the meeting of the minds. Meeting of the minds.